Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of our LDT podcast. My name is Sarah and we have with us today Mahen Singh Dionaran. Thank you so much for being here with us. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you do here at university?
Okay, so Sarah, thank you for having me. No need for Mahen Singh, you can just call me Mahen, okay? Basically, I'm the head of the Counselling Wellbeing service. I'm a chartered psychologist and I'm also one of the lecturers in psychology. And would you like me to tell you a little bit about the service?
Yes, please.
So basically, we offer a raft of different resources to support students who might be experiencing mental health and wellbeing issues. It's a confidential service which is free of charge for students at Middlesex University. We offer one-to-one counselling, which can be done on a face-to-face basis. It can be done remotely or it can be done on a hybrid basis. We also have a wellbeing advisor who works with students who might be experiencing emotional crises. And we also have a wellbeing ambassador, and we've got 3 wellbeing buddies who help us to promote wellbeing across the campus. As well as offering counselling support, we also offer group psychoeducational workshops. So, for example, how to manage depression, how to manage anxiety. So we've got somewhere in the ballpark of about 6 or 8 different workshops that students can make a referral to. We also organise on an annual basis a number of symposiums and events to promote wellbeing, and they're not just for psychology students, they're from students of any discipline to attend, and they're free of charge. And usually what we do is we have guest speakers from outside of the university. Sometimes it involves students or maybe academic members of staff who are coming to talk about wellbeing. And we also offer Power Skills, which is careers counselling. So that's just a snippet of some of the resources which we offer students.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. My first question to you is, why do you think having a respectful university culture is important, and what would it look like?
So, Sarah, I would expect a respectful university culture to have inclusive communication where both students and staff listen actively, they speak kindly, and they avoid discriminatory or dismissive language. And should disagreements arise, they would be addressed through dialogue rather than using aggression or exclusion. And I would also expect that people would make an effort to understand one another's experiences, especially those that are different from their own. And in the event that harm does occur, the individuals that are involved, as well as the university, they would take the responsibility towards working towards repairing any damage. Now, ultimately, a respectful university culture is one where everyone, regardless of their background, their identity, or their opinion, they feel a sense of belonging, and they feel they belong here and that they're treated with dignity. So that's how I would describe a respectful university culture.
That looks like an environment very conducive to learning as well. And you're safe, and you don't have to. Your focus really goes where it should be, rather than on other things. Like, for example, I've seen a lot of students deal with bullying, which is unfortunate. And I want to know more about how bullying manifests itself in university.
So, although it can be more subtle and complex than in comparison to earlier educational environments that the student may have attended, its psychological impact in a university setting can be just as damaging, if not more so. From a psychological perspective, bullying at this stage can often reflect power imbalances, social exclusion, and also emotional manipulation. And it can manifest itself in various forms, Sarah. So there's social and relational bullying, which includes excluding individuals from social groups or activities. It could also involve maybe spreading rumours or gossip, deliberately ignoring or ghosting someone, or manipulating friendships in order to isolate someone. And these behaviours can be particularly harmful because they target a person's sense of belonging and their identity, which are both critical during young adulthood. There's also cyberbullying, which can involve sending harassing messages or emails, public shaming, or social media. It could be using group chats to mock or exclude someone, or even sharing private information or images without that person's consent. Now, if you think about it, it can be relentless and quite intrusive, often following the student into their personal life and affecting their mental health around the clock 24/7. You've also got academic bullying, and this can occur between peers or even between students and involve faculty members of staff. Examples could be sabotaging group work, mocking someone for contributing in class, unfair treatment or favoritism, or even undermining someone's academic efforts or their ideas. And academic bullying, if you think about it in the long run, it can diminish someone's confidence and it can discourage that individual from participating or even pursuing their goals. The last manifestation I can think about is what we call discriminatory bullying. And this is where the aggressor or the bully targets individuals based on, it could be their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their disability, their religion, or even their nationality. And it can be in the form of microaggressions, stereotyping, verbal abuse, or even using slurs based on that individual's identity. And these types of behaviours can not only harm the individual, but it can also create a toxic environment on the campus.
Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like it's important for students to hear this because it's often things that we tend to minimize the importance of, especially in terms of, for example, microaggressions. A simple sentence can have such a huge impact.
Right.
And I feel like it's important that we learn to spot it early. And for example, also online cyberbullying, etc. In the era of social media where we spend so much time online, it's important to be able to spot these things. So thank you so much for sharing that. And who do you think tends to be more involved in bullying?
So bullying tends to be an interpersonal and relational issue. So it involves not just the bully and the victim when you think about it within the university setting, the dynamics can be quite nuanced. So there could be several roles that are involved here. So first of all, obviously you've got the perpetrator or the aggressor. Now, contrary to common stereotypes about bullies, bullies at the university level are not always overtly aggressive or physically intimidating. Alternatively, they might tend to use social power in order to manipulate or exclude other people. They might engage in, like I mentioned before, cyberbullying, or they might display passive-aggressive tendencies such as maybe being sarcastic. They might also dismiss their own actions as being banter or they were just joking. Psychologically, perpetrators may be driven by their own insecurities. They may have a need for control, or they may have experienced past traumas, or they may have a desire for social dominance, and some may even be oblivious or not even recognize their behavior as being bullying. The second role to consider is the victim. And victims are often targeted because they're perceived as being different. And that could basically be down to their race. It could be their, like I said, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their disability, or it could also be the beliefs that they hold. The victim may be introverted, they may be academically focused, or even socially isolated. And in some case, they may challenge the group norms or even speak out against injustices which can make them the target of the bully. Importantly, you've also got the bystander. Now, these are individuals who witness bullying, but they're not necessarily directly involved. And their role can be quite critical because we can differentiate between two types of bystanders. You've got the passive bystander and you've got the active bystander. Now, the passive bystander tends to be the individual that remains quiet or silent, often out of fear or uncertainty about what would happen if they speak out. And then you've also got the active bystanders, and they tend to intervene, or they would report the incident and they would support the victim. Psychologically, bystanders often experience moral distress. So when they witness harm, they may feel powerless to do anything, but empowering them with tools and support can shift the culture and reduce bullying. The last role to consider is what we call the enabler. Now, these are individuals who may not directly engage in the bullying, but they contribute to the problem by maybe laughing along. It could be they're spreading rumours or even reinforcing the group norms that tolerate exclusion or the cruelty. Now, often they act out of a desire to be part of or to belong, and they also perhaps want to avoid becoming targets themselves. It's important to recognise that bullying in university is rarely a one-to-one issue. It's a social dynamic, and it involves multiple roles like I've aforementioned. And it's influenced by psychological, cultural, and environmental factors.
It's interesting what you're sharing. Sometimes when we think about the bullying concept, we think about just the bully and the victim, and we often forget that we have bystanders and enablers. So it's interesting. And what would you recommend students do when they become aware or if they witness bullying?
I think it's important, Sarah, to acknowledge that witnessing bullying can be distressing. And it's not always clear, what do you do? But from a psychological perspective, bystanders have a very powerful role to play in this, because they can either reinforce or disrupt bullying behaviour. Now, some of the constructive actions that students can take include to acknowledge what you've seen. So recognise what you've witnessed, and it's not just a drama, or it's not just banter. It can be harmful behaviour. And you also might become the victim in the future as well. So you would want to basically stand up for someone who's experiencing this. Trust your instincts. If you feel something's wrong or someone's behaviour makes you feel uncomfortable, it's worth paying attention to it. The other thing that you could do is to support the target or to support the victim. So even small gestures can go a long way, can make a big difference. So check in with that person privately. It could be that you say something like, I just wanted to let you know that I saw what happened, and are you okay? Let them know that they're not alone. That's really important. Okay? You can offer to accompany them if they want to submit a report about the incident. And supporting someone can buffer the emotional impact of bullying, and can also help to restore a sense of safety and a sense of belonging. Something else which you could do is to interrupt the behaviour if you think it's safe to do so, that is. So if you feel safe and if you feel confident, you can interrupt the behaviour by saying something like, hey, look, that's not cool, or, that's not okay. You can also use humour or maybe distraction as a way to diffuse a tense situation. Even if you use non-verbal cues such as silence, or you give a disapproving look to the perpetrator, that can actually send a very powerful, strong message to that individual. Now, these types of actions make you, rather than being a passive bystander, an active bystander, and it can help to disrupt the social dynamics that are allowing bullying to persist. The other thing which you could do is to report the incident. Here at Middlesex University, we've got something called the Care and Concern Committee, which serves as a formal reporting channel. And it's usually for making complaints or raising issues to do with non-academic issues. Now, when you make a report, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting someone into trouble, but it's about protecting the well-being of everyone that's been involved, and also allowing the university to take the necessary action. Something else which you could do is to reflect on the group norms. So ask yourself, what kind of culture are we creating in our friend group, our association, or our classroom? Sometimes, Sarah, bullying is enabled by the group dynamics. And if the group dynamics go unchallenged, so if we encourage empathy, inclusion, and a sense of accountability within our social circle, we can prevent bullying before it even starts. Now, I want to emphasize that students are not powerless. By choosing to be empathetic and to speak up and to advocate for one another, you're contributing to a university culture where respect is the norm and bullying has no place over here.
These are very powerful techniques, and I hope that in using these techniques, the passive bystanders who will become active bystanders will contribute to a better environment at university. And I'm curious about what role you think empathy and respect have in addressing bullying.
Okay, so first of all, we have to understand what is empathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's the ability to be able to understand someone else from their internal frame of reference. Now, psychologically, empathy enables us to be able to recognize the emotional impact of our action on other people. Also, to be able to interrupt harmful behaviors by fostering compassion and concern, and also to be able to build meaningful connections, even across differences. Now, when students practice empathy, they are less likely to engage in bullying behaviour, and they're more likely to intervene if they witness bullying behaviour taking place. And empathy shifts the focus from judgment to understanding. And this is fundamental to both preventing harm as well as supporting healing. Also, I think, Sarah, respect is very important. Because it's important for developing healthy social interactions between one another. And that basically means acknowledging others' worth, okay, boundaries and other people's perspectives. Even when we disagree, we can agree to disagree. Okay? Now, in a respectful university culture, differences are not just tolerated, they're valued. And communication is thoughtful and inclusive. And power is not always used to intimidate or exclude others, but rather it should be used to uplift and to collaborate with other people. And when we think about respect, respect reduces the likelihood of bullying because it creates an environment or a climate where everyone feels heard and safe. Now, when empathy and respect are embedded in day-to-day campus life, be it through peer relationships, classroom dynamics, and the policies of the university, it creates a culture where bullying cannot thrive. And it creates, or I should rather say, it empowers students to speak up for themselves, to stand up for themselves, and to be able to reflect on their own behaviour and to repair harm when it occurs. Ultimately, empathy and respect, they go hand in hand, and they're not just responses to bullying. Metaphorically speaking, I would say that it's an antidote.
Right. Interesting. And what practical strategies would you recommend for promoting inclusion at university and for developing a respect charter?
All right. So as we've established, bullying is a complex social phenomenon. And if you think about each of the roles that we've spoken about, so the perpetrator, the bystander, or the victim, each comes with its own emotional and psychological challenges. So I would encourage students to begin with what we call self-reflection. And then this would be followed by intentional action. All right, so if we take each of these roles, starting with the perpetrator, I would encourage the perpetrator to reflect. So ask yourself, what was I trying to achieve through this behaviour? Was it about control, fitting in, or was I trying to basically mask my insecurities? Then consider the impact of your actions on someone else. How might your actions have affected the other person, emotionally, socially, or even academically? It's important to take responsibility, so acknowledge that you may have caused harm, and do so without being defensive. Seek support if need be. So you yourself, you can even refer yourself for counselling in order to try to understand some of the underlying issues and to develop healthier coping mechanisms or strategies. You can also work towards making amends. So if appropriate, you can proffer a sincere apology and commit to change. And lastly, you can work towards learning to be more empathetic. So engaging in activities or workshops that help you to understand other people's perspectives. If we take now the role of the bystander could also reflect and ask themselves, why didn't I intervene? Was it because of fear? Was it out of uncertainty? Did I feel powerless? They could also consider what message did their silence send to the victim as well as the perpetrator. So it's also about educating yourself. So are there safe ways that I could have intervened? You could work towards, rather than being a bystander, be an upstander. And that doesn't always mean confrontation. You can support the victim. So check in on them privately, because this can make a huge difference. You can also be courageous. So speak up. Challenge harmful behaviours if you think it's safe to do so. You could report incidences on behalf of the victim, and you could do so through the appropriate channels like I've mentioned. You've got the Care and Concern Committee. You can also do your part in terms of modelling respect. So by modelling respect, you can contribute to a culture of inclusion by demonstrating respectful behaviour in your daily interactions. Now, if we think about the vantage point of the victim can ask themselves, how's this experience affected my self-esteem? How I value myself, my self-worth? How has it impacted on my relationships and my academic life? It's important to acknowledge that as the victim, you're not to blame. Okay? You're not to blame for someone else's harmful behaviour or actions. Reach out if possible. Talk to a trusted friend. You can make a referral to the counselling service, or you can speak to a member of staff. You can also document the incidences. So keep a record, because this can help you later on if you choose to make a formal report. It's also important to practice self-care. So engage in activities that restore your sense of safety and self-worth. Also, as I mentioned previously, explore healing. So shoot off a referral to the Counselling Wellbeing service, or if you need to, seek therapy, because this can help you to process the experience and to rebuild your confidence.
Thank you so much. I believe that in listening to you talk about the ways in which students can promote this inclusivity on campus, I've noticed that there's inner work and also work on the outside as well. So I love the fact that students now know that there's a lot that comes from themselves and their work on themselves, rather than just actively getting involved as a first step. So this is interesting. And my last question to you is, to start the ball rolling, is there any advice you have to offer for student listeners out there?
There's several things I would recommend. First of all, could consider the co-creation of what we call a respect charter. So this would basically involve students creating a respect culture that creates or reflects the students' voices and values. It promotes ownership and accountability. And this charter can define what does respect look like in everyday interactions. And it can also outline expectations for behaviour within the classroom, even behaviour at student residences, or even online spaces. We spoke about cyberbullying. It could also include a commitment to inclusion, empathy, and accountability. And it can also be made visible in common areas, including the course syllabus, or even on digital platforms that the students use. Something else that I would recommend, Sarah, would be maybe the use of empathy building workshops. So empathy is a skill that can be developed, okay? So we could have workshops or peer-led sessions, and they could involve perspective-taking exercises, storytelling from diverse student voices, or even role-playing scenarios in order for students to practice respectful responses. And By using these workshops, these sort of like activities can help students to better understand the impact of their behaviour, and it can also build emotional intelligence. So the ability to understand other people's emotions and also the capacity to understand one's own emotions and feelings. I would also suggest promoting inclusive types of communication. So, encouraging people to use respectful, non discriminatory, and affirming language. So, one vehicle for doing that would be maybe awareness campaigns, or perhaps having training for SVLs or faculty members of staff. Um, and by using inclusive communication, this fosters a sense of belonging, and it also reduces the risk of exclusion or harm. Something else which would be effective is to establish peer support networks. And this would be in the guise of safe spaces where students can discuss experiences or exclusion or even bullying itself, and they can learn how to become active bystanders and to support one another in navigating through these difficult social challenges. There's also perhaps embedding respect and inclusion across the campus. So, Sarah, if we think about respect, these values shouldn't just be confined to the university's policies. They should be integrated into classroom discussions amongst students. It could also be integrated into group work norms, orientation programs that we have for students, SVL training programs, and even campus events that celebrate diversity and foster dialogue. I know that on an annual basis we have an MDX cultival where we celebrate different cultures and diversity. Another mechanism would be raising awareness about reporting mechanisms that we have. So I think basically students should be socialised as to how to go about reporting incidences and how to access support. So at Middlesex University, we've got the Care and Concern Committee, which handles non-academic complaints, which includes bullying and anonymous reporting. And victims as well as bystanders can also refer themselves to the Counselling Wellbeing service. And if you look around the campus, you will see that there are QR codes and there are web links which you can just basically click on, and it will take you straight to an online referral form where you can make a referral. On an end note, Sarah, what I would like to say is that it's very important that students acknowledge that you're not alone. Okay, there is support here if you need help, and I would just encourage you to reach out.
Thank you. I hope that on hearing this, students will be able to create a healthy environment at university where we all feel included and we all live, I would say, happily and more importantly at peace with each other. And thank you so much for all that you've shared. It will be helpful for all of us, whether we have been victims of bullying or whether we are witnessing it. And I'm sure you've shared information that if anyone is seeing themselves in a situation where they might be a bully, then it will lead to self-reflection. And in the end, I hope that we can all work together to learn together and in harmony with each other, which I think is very valuable. So thank you so much, and To you guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope that this was an informative session, and stay tuned for more episodes which we'll be releasing. Thank you so much.